Welcome to the Jesus People segment of the Antioch Indy podcast, a place where each week we're going to hear from different people about what it means to walk with God. We hope that you leave encouraged and equipped and that this builds your faith for what God wants to do in your life. Welcome, everybody, to the Jesus People segment of Antioch Indy's podcast. I'm your host, Karis Frigi.
The host.
Today, clearly, I have Andrew Zanacco, who is our lead pastor, and I have him here today for a specific reason.
You also have your 2 cups.
I also have my 2 cups of iced coffee and water because you just can't. Coffee actually makes you more thirsty, so it never satiates.
Good
Anyway,
to know.
and you have water in a coffee mug, so that's deceptive and not very exciting. But I have you here today, Andrew, because I would like to talk about culture with the caveat that sometimes you walk into like a business or a place and there's something, it's like you perceive it, but it's not spoken.
Yeah.
You know, when you walk into a place of excellence and you're like, oh, clearly they have tried to establish something here. And I like things to be spelled out.
Yeah.
And so I feel like for everyone listening, as they walk into Antioch and they have different thoughts, you know, every church has its own culture and its own things that they value. And so I just thought, why don't we talk about it instead of having it be the thing we don't talk about.
The thing we don't talk about.
But we hope people catch.
Right, yes.
You know?
Totally.
So.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I thought a lot about culture for a long time, and I think it becomes more and more a part of, I've noticed it become more and more a part of the church conversation over the last handful of years. But I think it's true of like, whether it's a business or church or really any group of people at all, there is a culture. And I think what that word means is kind of what you said, so for us, you know, we have our mission statement, which is preach the gospel of the kingdom and make others great.
Right.
And then we have these core values that we are living out, and we're doing the values course and all this kind of stuff. So we have a mission and we have values. And so the values are like personal devotion to Jesus, discipleship, life group, corporate gatherings, living on mission. So those are kind of, there's an aim that you're going for as a group of people, whether it's like a friendship or a family, a church, a business or whatever. You have a purpose that you're going after, and then you have kind of actions, like a way that you're trying to accomplish the aim or the purpose. And the culture is different than any of those things, because I think the culture is the experience of what it's like when you do those actions pursuing that goal. What is it actually like? What's it like for the people who are involved in it, and what's it like for the people who are kind of like on the outside? So, you know, like you said, walking into a business or walking into a church or walking into some place, what's it like for kind of somebody on the outside who experiences sort of the group of people doing their thing, going after their purpose? But then for the group of people, what's it like for them as they're a part of the team going after that deal? And so I think culture is important because, like you said, my nose is really itchy today.
It's okay.
Excuse me. I think, like you said, you know, the culture happens, whether you're intentional with it or not.
Right. And most of the time you don't know. Like if you think about the American culture, I don't know what it is. I'm just submerged in it until I go to another country, and then I become aware, like, oh, that was totally my, like, culturally. Yeah. You know, and just how you can offend people in different cultures without even knowing it.
Yes.
And it's almost that same idea. Like, how do we have context for who we are? And then be like, oh, this is our culture. This is what people sense when they're around us. This is how they feel. This is what we value. Yeah. But it almost feels like the unspoken. Like, if you think about our families, all have cultures.
Yeah, exactly.
And if I were to come into your family and do what I do in my family.
Totally.
You know?
Totally. Well, I mean, you totally experience that all the time. You go over to somebody else's house for dinner, and they just do things differently.
So different.
Like, they're doing all the same thing.
I know, like Chad's family only puts pepper on the table. My family only puts salt. Interesting. And it was like when we got married. Wow. We were just confused. Now we have to bring both because it's
match made in heaven.
And Eden, our daughter, even is always like, Daddy never salts anything. I'm like, I know. Just the Frigi gene.
The Frigi gene, they don't do salt.
Yeah.
So I think culture happens, you know, whether you're intentional with it or not, it's going to happen.
Totally.
And so I think it's really important for us as a church to be intentional about it, because I think that a lot of people, even a lot of people who would say they have, if we zoom in on church, people who have, you know, negative experiences with church or whatever, I think that there's a lot of times that it comes down to culture type of things. Right. That, you know, there's not a whole lot of churches with, you know, explicitly negative aims or missions,
Right.
you know, or
And
and
they
the
wouldn't
values
even know that
and the
that
values are
yeah.
all really similar between
Yeah.
you know, churches. I remember when we were starting this church and we were meeting with somebody before we moved, and he was like, you know, what's your church about or whatever, and we're kind of like, you know, love God, love people, make disciples. And he said, okay, what makes you different than any other 100 churches doing the same thing?
Yeah.
I was like, totally. I don't think that I don't think it's a negative thing. I'm glad that we're all trying to do those things.
Right.
But the point is, the aim and the actions like isn't really where the shortcoming is a lot of the time. I think where there's a lot of gray area and where a lot of the space is to fill with like good experience or potentially negative experiences and things like that is in that kind of culture atmosphere type of realm of like how do we actually go about these things. And so I think when you hear people talk about feeling like they can't go to a church because they just feel judged all the time or stuff like that, I think part of that is just people feel judged because they know that they're doing wrong, you know. And so whether anybody's actually judging them or not, I think people feel that sometimes. But then there's the other side where that's a legitimate thing that happens. And it's like, you know, so there can be a culture of like being judgmental,
right?
Which is like, we're trying to love God and we're going after all these things, and if people aren't, then we judge them. And that's not something that a lot of people would explicitly say.
Right.
And some people would, I guess, but I think that's one of those unintentional things that just kind of happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not focusing on defining it. And so I think that's what we've been trying to work on, is coming up with let's define the culture that we want to have, because if we don't define it, it'll still happen and it might not be what we want.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so many testimonies and so many people in our church are talking pretty consistently about loving the culture of our church. And I think our church has a great culture. But if you try to say, okay, what does that mean? You're going to get lots of different answers, which is a bad thing. It just means it's hard to grow. It's hard to multiply that out. So,
well, and I feel like it's helpful to hear from you, because I, you know, even extrovert versus introvert, different cultural things. Sometimes you can feel like especially in our church, like it seems like we have a lot of loud, like we're kind of loud. We agree with you a lot on Sunday. I remember I had someone in town and they were like, I don't think I could preach with that many people talking to me the whole time. And I was like, oh, really? We like do that to support you. But just to hear you say like, no, that's not like yes, that's totally part of what we do, but like it's not a better or worse if people are louder or less loud, you know. It's like I just feel like it could be a helpful conversation for people who are coming to our church that are like, well, I'm kind of more quiet and I'm less demonstrative, and this seems to be just a demonstrative church. It's like how do we be one and say like we need all different types of people,
right?
And how do we make a culture together?
Totally.
I just feel like it's important to hear from you that what our culture is, so that there isn't that misunderstanding of I must not belong here.
Totally.
Because I'm this.
Yeah, or like I don't do this one thing or whatever. Yeah, I think that's really good. So I've been really working on trying to define our culture, and really excited about it. And we're going to be going over it in our like membership dinners that are coming up or happening, that we're kicking off soon. Yeah. Talking about, you know, as a member of Antioch, basically what we're saying is we're committing to our mission, we're committing to our values, and we're committing to our culture and growing in that way as individuals in the context of a community that's trying to follow Jesus together. We want to do this together. And so on the culture side, you know, as we've tried to define it and think about it, even as we've been talking about culture right now, like it's such a sensory experience. It's sort of abstract. And if you've, you know, for people listening, maybe you're starting to connect dots like, oh, that's what that is when I experience at my favorite store, right? Or the gym that I go to, that I go to this gym instead of that gym. I can't tell you why, but I just like it better. Yeah, you know, it's like there's just a better culture. And so how do you define those things? And I think in realizing that they're so experiential and sensory, so we're kind of framing them around the five senses of like the five human senses. And so like the culture that we're wanting to create, that we're starting to put language to, is number one, that like we always see honor. Or I mean, that totally messed that up. We see hope. Honor is a different word.
Yeah, we see hope.
We see hope. And I want us to be a people that, you know, it doesn't mean that things aren't tough sometimes, but it means that like as a community of people, our eyes always see hope in every situation, in every circumstance. Like if God is the God of hope, then we need to train our eyes to always see hope. And I want that to be people's experience when they come around us, no matter what your situation is. If you step in, we're not going to ignore the things that aren't good or aren't tough or aren't trying to be hopeless, whatever. Like, but we're gonna fight to be a people who see hope
Right.
in all of those, in any type of situation.
Yeah.
And then like our touch brings joy. I'm hoping that our touch as a people can bring joy, so that if if one of your friends interacts with you, or if one of my friends interacts with me, like I hope I add joy to the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that everything's always smiles and giggles, but there's just a joy. And
Yeah.
the Lord says that the joy of the Lord is our strength. And so
Yeah.
when people have a touch with our community on an individual level, on a Sunday morning or whatever, I hope that we give strength, like in joy, that we
Mhm.
just bring that to the equation. When people rub shoulders with us, that we bring joy to the situation. So we see hope, our touch brings joy. I'm hoping that our sound can always bring honor. So like the way that we speak about people, the way that we speak about God, the way that we speak
Other
about each other,
churches.
other churches,
Yeah.
just anything, like
Mhm.
politicians.
Mhm.
Hello,
Mhm.
we need our sound to bring honor. And
Right.
I think honor is such a huge deal in the kingdom.
Mhm.
And I think that if we can be a community that our sound is honor, like the sound coming from us is honor, I think that like wins so much favor with people.
Yeah.
Because you can
definitely.
disagree,
Right.
like for sure, and you can think things are like wrong,
Mhm.
and like honor doesn't mean that everything you agree with everybody and there's no standard or whatever. It just is like the way Bill Johnson, the pastor at Bethel Church, says it. He says honor is celebrating who somebody is without stumbling over who they aren't.
Oh, that's really good.
I think it's amazing.
I mean,
yeah.
anything he says, you're
Yeah,
like,
he
yeah,
has a way of saying things.
there's another one.
And I think that just captures the heart
Yeah.
so great, which is like, cool, we can disagree with whoever about whatever, I can or anything, but that doesn't mean I have to dishonor that human
Mm-hmm.
as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And we're missing that in our world. And
Yeah.
our world is hungry for people to model. How do you love people that you disagree with? How do you love people that you have conflict with?
Right.
And so I hope our honor brings sound. And I think so that means our sound kind of coming out of us is honor towards people who kind of aren't part of our community. But within our community, I mean, I
Mhm.
think it's just as rare, frankly, in church culture to be able to disagree but still honor each other.
Yeah.
And, our marriages need to be full of honor. Our friendships need to be full of honor. Everything just needs to be full of honor.
Yeah.
Even as we're all growing and doing all this stuff, if we can have a sound that is always speaking honor towards people and not dishonor, I mean, just think about how secure we could all be
Mm-hmm.
around each other if we knew that nobody was being dishonorable behind our backs.
Mm-hmm. It'd be awesome.
I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's possible and we
Mhm.
can do it. And then I think the other side of that is that we're always honoring God.
Mhm.
Like that needs to be our worship, our
Yeah.
speech, our lives, like the sound from the vibrations of our life need to
Right,
be honoring
definitely.
towards God. So
Yeah.
our sound brings honor. What else is there? These other two are kind of a little bit abstract, but one of them being we taste like grace. I think that we need to taste like grace, and it sounds kind of funny, but in the same way, I think it perfectly describes exactly what I mean, like in sort of that abstract way, like just like when you taste something, you're trying to figure out what that one
Mm-hmm.
bit was, and you kind of like just kind of smack, like, what is that? Like I want that to be grace
Mm-hmm.
for us as a people when we interact with the world around us, when the world interacts with with us. There needs to be that experience of where people walk away and are like, man, I don't like, what is that one thing
Mm-hmm.
that was like so good?
Mm-hmm.
And that's got to be grace. And John 1 talks about Jesus coming full of grace and full of truth. And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of makes me think of like, as we are the people of God, we're serving a platter of truth to the world, and it needs to be salted with grace.
Mhm.
It needs to be seasoned with grace all the way on top.
Yeah.
And because they're not mutually exclusive. They
Yeah,
work perfectly
definitely.
together.
Mm-hmm.
For Jesus to be full of both, I mean, they must complement each other perfectly. So we taste like grace, and the last one is we smell like faith. And again, that kind of sounds a little goofy, but to me, I just think about somebody walking into the sanctuary on a Sunday morning, and if you think about smell, it just kind of
Permeates.
surrounds you
Mhm.
and fills the air, and like you just kind of breathe it in. And I think that's true for us,
Yeah.
that we really do smell like faith right
Yeah.
now, but I want that to be true for us, that if you come around us, like you're just gonna like there's just faith. There's faith in these people. And like I've said from the beginning, I remember back to some of our earliest meetings saying, like, if we never grow, never whatever, become something that looks like anything on the outside, if we could just be a people that our city knows, if you need God to move in your life, if you need something, go find some of those Antioch people that are going to pray.
Right, definitely.
Yeah, like, I'm game for that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So those are our 5 senses, our 5 cultural definitions.
So we see hope.
Mm-hmm.
Thought that was good.
Yep.
I'm like kind of judging us on this. I'm like, yeah, I feel like we're doing pretty good there. Okay, so we see hope. We hear, what was the next one? No, we sound like honor. That wasn't the next one.
Yeah.
We see hope. Our touch brings joy. Sound is
like
honor. Taste like grace. Smell like faith. That's good.
Those
Did you come up with that all on your own?
I mean, I think it was me and the Holy Ghost.
That's awesome.
On the beach in Mexico with my wife.
That is the place.
I know, just laying there.
For inspiration.
Laying there, laying under the sun. And this was like a couple weeks ago.
That's awesome.
My body was tingling because it didn't know what to do with sunshine.
Yeah, seriously.
It's been a long winter.
It's been a long winter.
My skin was like, what the heck is happening right now?
I know. It's worse in other parts of the world, though.
Yeah. I mean, I was still thankful. I mean, heck, it was awesome.
You're on a beach.
But yeah, I'm not complaining, that's for sure.
No, I think that's helpful. I think that's really good, and I think it's something that we can not just say from the front, but it's something to point in our D groups and in our conversations with each other. It's like a good check,
Yeah.
Because like we're going to, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another.
That's true.
I want to dishonor people who sharpen me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing more. When you're frustrated, there's nothing more that I want than to call someone and be frustrated with them over something.
Yeah.
And it's like it helps set up groundwork for when you experience being disenfranchised with different things. Like it's like in the church setting, hey, these are some good parameters when you feel frustrated.
Totally.
Are you smelling like faith in the person? No. Like, am I tasting like grace with the person? Probably not. It's like it's a really good a good Holy Spirit check.
I think it gives us framework for ourselves and then also for like how to believe the best in other people. Like if this really is our culture, then if person 1 and person 2 are having some sort of thing, and when they're both thinking about it off on themselves, then they can fight to believe these things about that other person. If it's like, man, that person really rubbed me the wrong way or said something or disappointed me or whatever. I mean, real things are going to happen. It gives us a framework as maybe the one who got hurt or got offended or whatever to be like, okay, I'm going to believe that when they said that, they weren't trying to be dishonoring. It just really dishonored me. And so we still need to talk about it.
Right.
But it doesn't need to be so combative. We can start from the place of believing the best in each other and have the conversation of like, hey, just want you to know, I'm assuming you didn't mean it this way, but when you said that, it really hit me this way.
Yeah.
you know, and instead of coming at people and being like, you always say stuff like that.
Right.
And it just gets nasty.
Yeah. I think too, hearing all that is really helpful because it's not a personality type. It's not like all ENFPs gather here for this church. It's like, no, you can smell like faith.
Yeah.
And love Bonhoeffer and sitting in a room and contemplative prayer and whatever. Like it's like you can do that.
Yeah.
Or you can be a total charismatic loony and smell like faith. Do you know what I mean? And like a great way. Like I consider myself one of those. It's like you can be whatever and fit these things. And the Lord, He's not. Anyway, just I want us to be a gathering of really diverse people where people are like, how do these people even become friends? But it's that John 17, like, let's make them one as you and I are one.
Yeah. Because all these things are way bigger than personal preferences or personalities and all that kind of stuff. So there's room for differences in all of those things kind of underneath this umbrella. You even mentioned people giving feedback during sermons and stuff, and that's something like I love and trying. We're trying to cultivate that because I think it helps kind of catalyze faith in the room when it's like, oh yeah, like we're actually engaged with this whole thing or whatever. And at the same time, there's not some expectation that everybody's shouting all the time, or something like that. And it's like you're not only a good Antiocher if you shout during the sermon or whatever. That's not the point. We're just kind of going for faith, and faith can look like 1,000 different things. So like you're saying, but I hope this is going to be helpful for us. And hopefully it gets painted on a wall somewhere.
That'd be awesome. We have
Kinda
a lot
like
of things on the
the
wall.
mission statement. I know.
Yeah, no,
I
it's
need to add
great.
to it.
It's really great. And I think I was talking to some people recently, and they were associating a specific like denomination with a lot of shame, and we were just these people like whatever aren't even in church or anything, and it was just so interesting because I was like, wow, this is like the conclusive, like everyone in the room agreed this was what this looks like, this religion looks like this, and this is how you feel, and it involved a lot of shame, and I was just thinking like, man, I don't want my kids to walk out of this one day and be like, well, you know, that Antioch church, and then everyone know what that means.
Right.
You know, like I hope that they know what it means in terms of wow, that was an awesome place for you to grow up. You know, or like a place where you must have really encountered real people.
For sure.
Walking with a real God. And
For sure. And I hope that, you know, kind of like you're saying, it leaves so much room for anybody to be anywhere on the journey. That it's not like some standard of perfection that we're demanding of each other or expecting of everybody else. I mean, I think those 5 things, anybody can walk into that environment. Like I can walk into that environment and I'm like, I need all those, like I need grace from people, you know, like I really appreciate if people don't talk mess about me behind my back. I need joy from other people. Like I need all of these things from everybody else. And so it's not like a Christian this or non-Christian that type of thing. It's like anybody should be able to walk in, and as the people of God, this is kind of what the experience should be like. And then in the midst of journeys and disagreements or conversations or growth or challenge or encouragement, whatever, all of those things kind of happen. I think you said this at the beginning. It kind of gives a framework for all of those things to happen. That like, hey, cool, let's have this conversation about a tough subject, or like, I mean, I mentioned politicians. It's like, man, we've got to change the tone of this whole thing. I mean, it's nasty. And like the church, like we've got to set a new standard here and like set a new model, like a new example of like, we need to model these things to the world. Like, how do you navigate hard things without demonizing everybody?
Right. Totally.
I mean, like, my goodness, you know, how do you disagree with somebody without cursing them and whatever? And like, it's just brutal how we as just humans and as the church at large and, you know, whatever, like I've done it too. I've said stupid stuff, but I just think that there's so much potential available in like a clarified culture if we'll live it out.
Definitely.
Because I think that's the missing piece. Like going back to what we talked about at the beginning, I think some people have gotten so turned off by things, not because they're not true, but because they taste bad. You know, like
absolutely. In church itself, I mean, that's what's so hard. I like feel so concerned for the people who come in once and get turned off by one church and then never try any other ones. I'm like, dang it. Like, but I think it goes back to all of that. If we are intentional about setting up a place, you know, we can't guarantee everyone has a good experience every time, you know, but like if we're walking in that, it makes me think of several things. The tasting like grace. I know like as a church, and we have a high value for personal time with God, right? So and like the suggested amount would be like an hour in the morning. But if we're tasting like grace, I feel like I'm always looking for a religion. Do you know what I mean? Like a check this box and then you'll be like spiritual. And I think this is what I do appreciate about you is I feel like you're very like you're good at not making religious things religious just to be religious. It's like, why do we spend time with God? Because it feeds my soul. So then it becomes, instead of like, now you have to spend an hour with God if you're gonna be part of the D school or if you're gonna be part of whatever, it's like actually just encounter God. And then it doesn't matter how long. It's like, do you know what I mean? And I feel like if we can continue to hold this culture up as we send things out to people and challenge people like, hey, let's memorize scripture. Well, that can become a noose around your neck. And you search the scripture because you think you have found life, yet you refuse to come to me. Like Jesus said that, and it's like, what? So I just feel like the more that we can use that and hold on to these principles in the middle of encouraging and exhorting people, it'll just be really big.
Yeah, I think so. And I think back to something you were just saying about like, you know, people having a good experience and everything. I think it defines what a good experience means. Because again, kind of in the church world, like that can be such a loaded couple of words. Like we want people to have a good experience. Like those words can get so loaded. And, you know, like something we've said from the beginning is that our target audience as a church is Jesus.
I wanted to bring that up because I remember you saying that I can even remember like the Sunday you saying that and being like, that's what I want to be part of.
Right.
I don't want a consumer experience. I don't, although I want people to feel welcome and I want my kids to be taken care of and all that.
Totally. And I mean, I think if Jesus is our target audience, then we should do everything the best we can do it.
Right.
But there's a difference between, I've just, real frankly, like there's no one person that's the target audience of our church. There's no one demographic that's the target audience of our church. Jesus is the target audience. Like if our church is great for some demographic of people and doesn't honor Jesus, it's not church.
Yeah, definitely.
Then it's a party.
Yeah.
And parties are great, but it's not, it's different. And like, we're not going to be driven by the fluctuating preferences and opinions and all of that kind of stuff of some demographic or some individual or even me. I mean, that being said, of course, my and our preferences will play through, because we're people. I mean, so those things will happen, but those aren't the driving factors of like, worship in our church is aimed at Jesus. And so sure, it has like whatever our flavor is or the person leading the song. Of course, they're going to have their flavor on it, which I think honors God, because he made that person. But Jesus is our target audience. So what does a good experience mean? A good experience for people doesn't necessarily get defined by everything was perfectly up to their preferences or whatever on an individual level. Like that will never happen
ever.
Like if you get two people in a room, you're not going to accomplish that. So that's not the goal, because one, you can't hit it, and so it just doesn't matter. So a good experience means these 5 culture pieces were lived out.
That's
that
good.
People were in an environment where they experienced honor, where they got joy brought to their life. People around them brought hope into their life. They were surrounded by grace. They were in an environment filled with faith. And then individual so-and-so did whatever they did with it, which is all of our choice in the end with Jesus, which is like, did Jesus make everybody perfectly comfortable? Absolutely not. Right. So he wasn't the one that was wrong. He was perfectly living the culture of the kingdom of heaven, and he was exemplifying it, and he was manifesting the Father to us perfectly. And still a ton of people turned away. So they didn't make Jesus wrong. It just means people didn't want it. Right. And so there's always that, But I think as far as our responsibility goes as believers, as a church or whatever, I think we need to learn from Jesus and say, okay, as his people, we're here for him. Primarily, we're here for him. So I check my preferences at the door, I check my opinions at the door, and I submit those things to him. So we can have conversations about all those things. Those matter to a point, but ultimately it's just we're turning to Jesus. So are we focusing on the main target audience here, and are we loving people well, which is really what these culture things are all about. So, and that's that's why I said do everything you can do the best you can do it, because I think that just loves people. Right. When we take care of kids well, it's like, we care about these little humans, so let's take care of them well. It's not some excuse of like, Jesus is the target audience, so nothing matters. Right. It's like, I don't know where those lines get crossed, but
it's great. I think it's great. I think it's exciting. I think so. We're having these this value course that you're emailing out, and then at the end of that, you have a dinner. Yeah. Which we're starting when? What is the first one?
So if you don't know about the values course, check out the values course. It is a 6-part video series, 9 to 12 minutes long each video. The first one is about kind of our story and vision as a church, and then the next 5 are our core values for a church. So what are our values? How do we live them out? How do we talk about them? And that's for anybody. So we send that out to everybody who's a guest at our church, and we're also asking that everybody who's been here from the Zanako House living room days, to check it out, just so we can get all on the same page and get in the same language. And then after completing the values course, you'll be invited to take the next step, which is becoming a member at Antioch, which essentially just means, okay, now I know these values, but now I want to commit to living these values as a part of this family. Yeah. So you'll be sent a document that kind of outlines what the commitment is, kind of like a member to Antioch, and what the commitment is sort of Antioch to a member. What does that look like, and hopefully define that in a really clear way. You'll be invited to come to a dinner with other folks who are wanting to take that same step. We'll feed you, we'll hang out, we'll do some Q&A, we'll share a little bit more kind of behind the scenes stuff for church stuff, like some brief financial things, that kind of thing. Just bring everybody in on the loop, and then we move forward from there. So it's all super easy to be a part of. You can find it on our YouTube channel and sign up and under any one of those videos, and you'll get led along and all that kind of stuff. But
it's great.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, thanks, Karis.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week with another story. I think the best.
Sam and Sarah Best.
Right?
Don't miss it, folks.
Yeah. Thanks so much for listening with us today. If you would like any further information or resources, you can visit AntiochIndy.com or find us on Instagram at AntiochIndy.